Alrighty, we might make a start. So just for those people who have joined in the last minute or so, we are recording this webinar. So if you're not wanting your face in that recording for privacy reasons, just make sure to pop your video off. So welcome everyone. This is our Recycle Right Saving Soft Plastics with REDCycle webinar as part of our National Recycling Week events. My name is Elizabeth. I'm here from the Resource Recovery Group representing Recycle Right. And then we've also got Rebecca Gleghorn here from the RED Group, which is the organisation which runs the REDCycle program. She's their marketing and communications manager, and she's calling it all the way from Melbourne. So hi, Rebecca. So I'm just going to very quickly run you through, I guess, a little bit about Recycle Right and the recycling rules in WA. This webinar is open to people from all over WA. So just keeping that in mind, I guess, when we're going through. So to make a start, what is Recycle Right? So Recycle Right is the education arm of the Resource Recovery Group. Now, the Resource Recovery Group up until very recently was called the Southern Metropolitan Regional Council. It's a regional council that handles waste management and waste education, and Recycle Right is our education program. So we work to encourage and assist residents and businesses in WA to recycle, reduce their waste, and live more sustainably. We've got, which I'm sure a lot of you have already seen, we've got a website and a smartphone app, which covers all of the bin systems across WA. So in your area, you might have 2 bins, so a general waste and recycling. You might have 3 bins, and the options for those could either be a GO, so just garden organics in your lime green bin, or FOGO, which includes food and garden organics. And so our Recycle Right program covers all 3 of those options. It also includes a materials A to Z list. So I've got a little screenshot of the website just at the bottom there. The app is very similar. It's got the same sort of information on it. And so both of these include a materials A to Z list, the Find My Nearest tool, which is where you can find drop-off locations closest to you for all the items that you can't recycle through your curbside bins. So things like polystyrene, soft plastics, batteries, aerosols, all that sort of stuff you can find through our Find My Nearest tool. You've got bin day reminders on the app as well. So rather than checking out what bins your neighbours have popped out, you can use that handy reminder on the app on your phone. And then a bunch more resources like posters and printouts, educational worksheets, that sort of stuff is under our resources hub on the website. We have also got a Facebook, Instagram, and then a YouTube channel, which I'm sure a lot of you came through the Facebook page, so hopefully you're following us. And then we also do run tours of our Canning Vale Centre, which has a recycling facility and the FOGO processing. They're free, so jump onto our website if you're keen on one of those. We also run school incursions for our member councils, and then you'll often see Recycle Right with stalls at events as well. So we're going to jump ahead and quickly have a look at what we take in recycling in mainly Perth and Peel. This generally covers most of WA as well, but there are some more rural areas where the rules are ever so slightly different. I've got a really big bold point at the bottom there that says to note that recycling rules are now the same across all councils in the Perth and Peel region. So they're not different for each council. As of a couple of years ago, we came together with what we're calling a consistent communications collective, and we agreed on a set rule or a set list, sorry, of A to Z items and how to dispose of them. So all of our recycling facilities have agreed that it's only the 5 things, so plastic bottles and containers, glass bottles and jars, steel and aluminium cans, and then paper and cardboard that we take in recycling. Everything else is sort of a no-go, or there's other ways to recycle it outside of that bin. But it's just keeping it simple so we can get a really clean stream of recycling and make sure that we're getting the best, I guess, end products for our recyclable items. So that's no aerosols, no hazardous items, no meat trays. And then the big one for today's webinar is no soft plastics. So what is a soft plastic, you may ask? So we've got the last little slide here for you, explains very quickly the difference between a hard and a soft plastic. So hard plastics are rigid. We often use the rule of thumb is like a scrunch test. So if you can scrunch an item, say like a milk bottle, and it retains its shape, it's a rigid, solid form, then that's a hard plastic. And if it's a sort of generic item from the kitchen, bathroom, laundry, that's the sort of thing that we accept in the yellow top recycling bin. Whereas a soft plastic is something that's scrunchable. So like in the photo we've got there, your plastic bags, I love the Tim Tam wrapper. Your bread bags, plastic post satchels, pet food bags, that sort of stuff. If it's something where if you were to scrunch it up into a ball in your hand and it wouldn't sort of bounce back and keep its shape, it's that kind of plastic bag sort of item, that's a soft plastic. Now, we don't accept those in the yellow lidded recycling bins, and that's across the board, across all councils in Perth and Peel. And that is because they often contaminate the paper and cardboard streams. They're quite light. And so it means that the way that we sort paper and cardboard out at a recycling facility, they often get caught up in that and they contaminate those bales of recycling. So we ask that you keep those out. If you're wanting to just use your curbside bins, they can go in general waste. But ideally, you'd be taking them to a REDCycle bin at Coles or Woolworths. And from there, I will hand over to Rebecca.
Hello, thank you for that introduction and the description. You've done half my job for me today. So if we're able to start my presentation, if you're able to flip over. Oh.
If you just want to share your screen, it should let you.
Let's tell me if this works. What are you seeing now?
Oh, the two next to each other.
This is what happened before, isn't it, ladies? We'll get this right. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we had this issue before when we were setting up, and it looks like it's done it again. So I'll just take this opportunity to share. Oops. Oh, goodness.
Yes, just while you're doing that as well, we're going to have an awesome presentation from Rebecca. I've seen her give something similar before. It was really informative. And I know we've all got 1,000 burning questions, and thank you for sending them all through with your Eventbrite registrations as well. I have passed those on to Rebecca, so hopefully we'll cover off a lot of that in the presentation. But if we could just leave the questions to the end, 9 times out of 10, she's probably going to answer your question during the presentation anyway. So, we'll run through her presentation and then we'll get to a bit of a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, the issue at the moment is now when I'm trying to share it. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. It's happening. Technology's not going to fail me.
We're almost there.
What can you see? It's one thing.
Perfect.
We got there. Sorry for that confusion, ladies and gentlemen. It can take a little bit of time sometimes for the technology to work.
Oh, thank you. Welcome, emojis.
Thank you for those. So we'll get right stuck in. What is REDCycle? Well, we've had a bit of an explanation, but effectively we're a Melbourne-based recovery initiative for post-consumer soft plastic, and I'll explain what that means, that operates in Coles and Woolworths stores nationwide. Post-consumer soft plastics refers to household soft plastics as opposed to soft plastics that are generated commercially or in big businesses. That's what differentiates REDCycle from other recycling programs that are on offer. And that's why REDCycle is so important, because we're the only post-consumer soft plastic recovery initiative in the country. So where it all began, I really love telling this story. So the lady you see on your screen at the moment, it is our director and founder, Elizabeth Cassell, and she was just a mum. And she, like most of us, was very confused why she couldn't put her soft plastics out with her recycling bin, which none of us can do, and wanted to do something about that. So she had to think about it. And of course, there was all the logistics about how to collect it and where she was going to collect it from. But she thought more broadly and thought about, well, if I collect all this material, what am I then going to do with it? Where does it go? There's no point in collecting it if I can't do anything with it. So at that point in time, she partnered up with RePlus, who are a company who were, this is 10 years ago now, were able to take the material on and turn it into things like the bench that she's sitting on there. She won some Sustainability Victoria funding, a grant, and was able to introduce the program to schools in Victoria. And as the program became more popular with the families within the schools, she turned to Coles, and that's another long-term partnership we've had, and got them to introduce the program at their stores so more people could become could be able to use the REDCycle program and the bins and recycle their soft plastics. Obviously now, 10 years later, we're in over 1,900 locations around the country. in Coles and Woolworths stores. So we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year, which is a great achievement. These are the bins that you will find in the Coles and Woolworths stores. A couple of things about the bins. The bins are actually designed, and so is the signage, by the respective supermarkets. They're not something that we provide, nor do we have an input in when they're designing. They design them around their needs and their particular requirements. These have changed over time and will likely change again in the future, depending on how useful they are. Some Coles stores are introducing a slightly different bin to make the top bigger so people can put more in, but some people we're talking about actually putting some lids on them so that people are less likely to just throw in general waste. If you're going to take your soft plastics, you actually have to lift a lid, and that just remarkably, just that extra action is going to bring down some of the contamination. And I'll talk a little bit about the contamination later because I saw it was one of the questions. So as was talked about before, some of the things that you can put in, everything from bread bags, the outer wrappings of biscuits, paper goods, so the outside wrappings of your toilet rolls and hand towels, pasta and rice bags, and the frozen vegetable bags, confectionery bags, old plastic bags. Hopefully not a lot of stores are using those old style green bags anymore, cereal box liners, and old green bags. Now I'm going to verify, or clarify I should say, when we say old green bags, obviously they all started out as green, but they do come in many different colours now, and we do accept all the different colours. You'd be surprised how many times I get asked, but I've got one of those bags, but it's red or yellow or blue. Can I put that in? Yes, you can. As long as it's a woven polypropylene bag, which is what that material is, you're able to recycle with us. It doesn't have to be the green colour. So we do have this other list on our website that you can go to if you're getting a bit confused about the different plastics. So we ask you to have a look at that list. We do update that list occasionally, which is why we don't produce a PDF version of it to print out, because it does change. We ask people to refer to the previous slide that I had up that had the general stuff. If you've got questions, check out this website, or you can email us. But also be very aware now of the new ARL symbols, so the Australian Recycling Label symbols, that are appearing on more and more packaging you'll see coming out now. Good thing to know is that the Australian government has got a 2025 packaging targets that every piece of packaging in Australia by 2025 has to be recyclable, reusable or biodegradable. So every piece of packaging, all brands are going through an assessment process through APCO, which is the Australian Packaging Covenant, in conjunction with us when it comes to soft plastics, and having their packaging assessed to ensure that it meets the requirements to be able to go through our streams. And then they will have either a REDCycle logo on them or the ARL symbol that says return to store. And just note that obviously some brands who have come on board, their packaging may have been approved, but it still has the old symbols on it. That's because they've got a build-up of stock that they have to work through first before they can put the new, print up the new packaging. Otherwise, they don't want to, waste thousands of dollars worth of product just by turfing it because it's got the wrong logo on the package. So just be mindful of that, be patient. More and more people are coming on board as they have to by 2025, and it's really exciting. And I'll talk a little bit about the partners in a moment. So just some stats for you. We're presently recovering over 3.5 million pieces of soft plastic every single day. So thank you to everybody who participates in that. You can understand that's a huge amount of soft plastic. And since 2011, given that this is our 10-year anniversary, we've now recovered, recycled and diverted over 3 billion pieces of soft plastic, so 12,000 tonnes from landfill. So that's a huge achievement. And you can imagine if all of that plastic was still out in the environment, it would be flying around, being digested by animals and wildlife and getting out into the ocean. So we've successfully stopped 12,000 tonnes and more. Well, that's growing every single day. So REDCycle is not just we're not just a small, well, we're a very small company to be honest, but REDCycle, we really rely on brands for their support to help keep the business going. And without their support, we wouldn't be able to continue as we have been able to, and we're growing exponentially at the moment, which is great. These brands who come on board are people who have decided to take responsibility for the end of life of their packaging. So these are brands who have acknowledged that, okay, we produce these products. This is sometimes soft plastic. I know people are going to hate me saying this, but sometimes soft plastic is the only form of packaging that people can use because of being transportable, less breakage. Sometimes it's the only type of packaging that can extend the shelf life of some products. So it is the only option. But these are brands who have said, well, if that's our only option, we want to take responsibility for what happens to it after our consumers purchase our product. So you can see there that the number of brands coming on board just took started going sky high in 2017. We started to take off, and we've actually got over 200 brand partners now. These are some of the brands, but if you jump on our website, you'll see the list is just growing and growing, so much so that we've had to stop using this loop that we used to have. We used to just keep adding the brands in, but there's so many now, you wouldn't be able to see them. You wouldn't be able to tell who they are, but you can see there's some big ones in there. Kmart are on board, Huggies, Corn Thins, Mars, Continental, Tip Top, Belgers. There's a whole lot of really big brands involved, which is great that these people are taking this on board. And a lot of smaller companies are coming on board as well. So what happens to the materials? Well, once you put it in the REDCycle bin, they're collected by us and sorted at our facility in Victoria. Now, when I say collected by us, it does depend on how rural and regional some of the locations are. If our trucks can get there, great. Otherwise, Coles and Woolworths put the soft plastics back onto their delivery trucks and take them back to their major distribution centres within that state, and then our trucks collect it from the distribution centre. So there's a lot of logistics that go on behind the scenes, which may explain for some people why, you know, we can't get to some regions, etc. So that's what happens. It comes back to Victoria. We sort it out. And then once we sort through it and get rid of some of the contaminants and bale it up, we send it off to 3 Australian manufacturing partners. We've never sent the material offshore. So what happened in China didn't implicate us at all. So REDCycle, and they turn it into things like indoor furniture, bollards, signage. Close the Loop, who use it for an additive for a new asphalt called Tonoplast. I'll talk about that in a second. And Plastic Forest, and they turn it into things like mini wheel stops and air conditioning mounts. I'll show you some of those in a second. Here's some images of some of the materials that some of the products that are made by those various companies. So you can see there's council signage for parklands, there's fitness equipment for some parklands, bollards, the benches, and they can come in, the seats can come in all different shapes and sizes. The little buddy benches, so you might see that REDCycle holds some competitions sometimes where a school can win a buddy bench for their yard for kids who are feeling a bit lonely. And it's a nice place for them to go and sit and attract some other friends to come and sit and talk to them. So a little bit of trivia for people, in case you ever get asked this question in a trivia night. So 1 kilo of soft plastic equals 1 kilo of the REDCycle product, and it takes up to 250 plastic bags just to make 1 kilo. So that seat in that image can weigh anywhere between 60 and 70 kilos. So that's up to 17,500 bags just to make that seat. So that's a lot of soft plastic. So you can see when I say we're recovering, 3.5 million pieces of soft plastic every day, if it's taking 17,500 pieces of soft plastic to make that particular seat, it is all going to use. And that decking you see there was also made from the soft plastics with a blend of other plastic materials, some other hard plastics as well. Some more products. So like I said before, the mini wheel stops. So if you've got a garage that is quite small and you don't want to run into the wall, or you've got an incline, you can buy these mini wheel stops from Plastic Forest, and the air conditioning mounts there, so you can see to keep them up off the ground, and also the road base, which I'm going to talk about. So Tonoplast, it's actually made from the recycled soft plastics and the toner from used printer cartridges that when you recycle them through the cartridges for Planet Arc. That all gets mixed together to create this product called Tonoplast. That then goes off and then gets mixed with recycled glass, and then that gets turned into a traditional asphalt replacement. So this is just to show the life cycle of the plastics going into the bins, being baled up and coming out. So this particular asphalt performs better and lasts longer than standard asphalt, so it's a better investment for councils. It's also gone through, had an order and exemption from the New South Wales EPA. It's no more risk to the environment than standard asphalt, and that included unprecedented analysis of leaching and microplastics. We do get asked that question a lot of the time about, but what about leaching? People do seem to forget traditional roads have petrochemicals and a lot of other chemicals in them that leach just as much, they're just as dangerous or to the environment. So yeah, it's no more risk to the environment than standard asphalt, but it is better performing and longer lasting. So the new product that's been made by our friends at REDCycle is this Polyrock Concrete. So it's an alternative to mineral aggregate in concrete. And so this is starting to be used in a lot of the Coles car parks, in walkways and footpaths around different councils. And we have noticed, if you follow REDCycle or even us, which I posted about it today, they recently, a couple in Frankston here in Victoria, used this to lay in their driveway. So the public can now purchase this to use as a concrete alternative in their driveways, which is a really, really great advancement. The big thing that we want everybody to understand, so we're not just about, we're less about, I guess, encouraging people just to use the REDCycle bins, and more about trying to get everybody to understand that with all recycling, our job as consumers doesn't end when we walk over to the bins and put our recycling in the bin and think that our job is done. That's a great start, but if people don't embrace purchasing products made from recycled materials as opposed to purchasing brand new products made from virgin materials, then there's no place for the recycling to go. So we need people to truly understand that recycling is all about putting it in, turning it into something, and then buying the new products that are made from that material. Otherwise, it will just stockpile. And so we've really got to build a robust market for these products, all of the products that you've seen, but I'm talking also for paper products and things made from the recycled hard plastics and glass, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just about soft plastics. Without having these material markets, we don't have recycling, we don't have a circular economy, there's no progress, and more materials will end up in landfill. So it's really important that we get everybody to start thinking a little bit differently about their purchasing habits, particularly councils who are coming on board more and more to understand that we really need to be buying a lot of the products that are made, and understanding also that one of those park benches that I showed you before, they're far more resistant to fading in sun, and there's no chipping. And if something does happen to it, like a car happens to run into one and breaks, then it can be returned to REDCycle and then turned back into another product. So that's the benefit of that particular park bench over a wooden one, that if it's broken, it just goes to landfill because they can't reuse it. So that's something to think about. Now I'm going to call up, there's a lot of words on the next screens, but this is just some of the questions that came through from you guys, which I'm going to try and go through so we can touch off on as much as possible in case it's something that you're thinking about. So contamination collection bins, how often, how much and how this affects the process. So the collection bins, we do get about up to 16% contamination, and the contamination isn't what people tend to think it is. It's not people putting in the wrong sorts of materials. It's people using those bins for general waste when they walk by, throwing in a coffee mug or a drink bottle or something. If that's got any liquid still in it and that spreads through the whole bin, then we can't use that bag and that has to go to landfill. So that's where the contamination comes from. So if you see, that's why these bins are often in kind of tucked away spaces in Coles and Woolworths. A lot of people complain, why isn't it out the front? Well, that's why we're trying to minimise that people just throwing things in that then means that that bag can't be used. So if you do see people using for general waste, try to pull them up, see did you know it's not meant to go in there? And if you know, local supermarket and you think it's in a high traffic area, maybe suggest to the store manager if it could be moved somewhere else to prevent this type of contamination. So the percentage of the soft plastic that is recycled. So everything else that we get is then recycled. We don't want to stockpile, we don't, and we have those 3 manufacturers who can take the material. But as I said, we do need people to have a bigger market for it. And as REDCycle is becoming more and more part of everybody's psyche and their thinking and their everyday movements, obviously we're taking in more material, and at the moment we've got enough to go out and be turned into stuff, and there's a market there for that stuff, but we need to increase that market if that's going to be sustainable long term. The benefit of recycling soft plastics, I think I touched on that earlier, in that we've, you know, diverted over 12,000 tonnes of material from landfill. Do we accept soft plastics from meat? Yes, we do, as long as if it's had any blood or greasy residue, say from chicken bags or what have you, please make sure that that's been washed and is 100% dry. If it's just been a cuts from the deli or whatever, and it's not greasy or anything, then that's fine. Cling wrap. We get asked this all the time. So just so you know, most cling wraps on the market to date have been made from PVC, which is quite toxic when heated and processed. And that's why we've not been able to collect cling wrap. There are some brands like Glad and Multex and some of the Coles home brand and Woolworths home brand who have stopped using PVC, and more cling wrap companies are starting to move away from the PVC material. So just keep an eye out on the labels. So a lot of it is changing over, but that's why we can't say yes, no categorically, because we do have brands that don't use PVC, but just try to be mindful of that when you're thinking about what you're putting in, or even when you're purchasing different types of cling wrap, that it's one that we will be able to process. How clean do they need to be? Do labels need to be removed? No, labels up to A5, which is half an A4 piece of paper, they don't have to be removed. The small amounts of paper can be tolerated. And as long as if it's a wrapping from a biscuits or a chip packet, just make sure that you've shaken out as many crumbs as possible. You don't have to do a proper clean of it, just as long as there's nothing in there, give it a wipe out and that's fine. Drop-off bins for regional locations. So we do get asked this a lot too. So we are with Coles and Woolworths, as you know, because they've got locations everywhere. In the regional areas, and we're very conscious of the fact that presently we only can get to 85% of Australians. There are 15% of the country that we can't reach. But what we have been trialling in New South Wales recently at 12 Australia Post offices, they've had REDCycle bins. It looks like that's working really well, and if successful, they're going to roll that program out to well over 1,000 Australian Post locations in rural areas so that more people will have access. Can community groups get involved? So no, being a collection point, there's a lot of logistics I think I alluded to before. So it is difficult for us to just set up with individual businesses and what have you. There has to be a whole logistics operation behind it. So it makes it a bit difficult for us to do smaller collection points. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we don't collect commercial waste because there is other organisations who collect it. We're the only ones who do post-consumer, so it's important that we stick to that because otherwise it gets too big for us. There are other people already operating in that space. So we encourage businesses to use Planet Arc. They've got a website where you can go on and check out, much the same way as the website that was mentioned before, the nearest collection points or nearest recovery businesses. You can look on Planet Arc to find out if there's places nearby your workplace who can then recover the commercial quantities of material. Here's some other ones. The independent grocers and general stores, I think I've covered that. The burden of transport, this is an interesting one. Why is the burden of transport placed on the business who is the drop-off point? I'm not sure why that's out there. I think I've explained now that we have the logistics set up with Coles and Woolworths where it's a combination of us going out to get the materials, or in more remote locations, they have the capacity to collect all the materials and take it back to one central point where we can then pick it up from. One Oak Group's drop off collected soft plastics directly to the depot in Perth. We can't have, for a number of reasons, we can't actually have people go to the depots because of the increase in the amount of material that we're recovering. The depots are very busy, and they can get quite dangerous if we had the public coming in and out of the depots. So even in Melbourne, we don't have people coming to the depots either. And we had to stop mailed items for the same reason, because of the increase in the amount of materials that we're recovering. I think I've touched on that next one about the regional and remote. How is REDCycle encouraging less soft plastics being used in the first place? We work very closely with APCO. I mentioned them at the beginning, the Australian Packaging Covenant. And obviously there's the 2025 guidelines that was talked about, where businesses have to make that decision that soft plastics or packaging has to be either reusable, recyclable, or biodegradable. And we have a big voice in working with brands to ensure that they meet those guidelines. As I mentioned before, I don't think it's unrealistic to suspect that all soft plastics will completely disappear for the reasons I outlined before, but we are working with businesses and with the government on how we can reduce the use of soft plastics, or at least make them one of those three things, so reusable, recyclable, or biodegradable. I've talked about why we've partnered with Coles and Woolies. They had great distribution. They were very early adopters, and you know, there's the possibility for expansion in the future. We're not saying that they're the only ones we'll ever work with. We've just got to do it incrementally and do it nicely. So, as you know, we've got to make sure that the amount that we're taking in is then being used. So that's a very precarious thing that we've got to manage, and that's why we've grown kind of slowly to date. I would like to know how much is recycled and how many cycles the plastic can withstand. I'd like to know if there are plans to increase operations to cover on the path moving forward to them. I think I've touched on that. I hope that was responded to in my previous answers, and the quantity of soft plastics. So as I've already mentioned, we take in 3.5 million pieces of soft plastic a day. No, it's not true that we receive so much that we can't process it all, but it will get to that point if people don't embrace, and if councils don't embrace buying products made from the recycled materials, but we're not there yet. And so I need to squish that rumour, because that one's been around for a long time. Is the soft plastic they receive highly contaminated? No, like I said, people who are diligent and passionate about REDcycling tend to be really great at doing the right thing. The main contamination we get is from people who don't understand what the bins are for and put in the wrong materials there. But for the most part, you know, if we get small amounts of contaminants, like, you know, a few items here and there that are not the right sort of plastic, that's okay. But, you know, and that's why initially we stopped all cling wrap, because more and more people putting more and more cling wrap in, and initially we were only getting bits here and there. Then we stopped it, and then we made that differentiation between the PVC types and the non-PVC types. So we've been able to weed out sort of those levels of contamination. We've just got to try to bring down the amount of coffee and soft drinks that get spilt into the bins. Do you have enough buyers for the products they make? Yes, at this point in time we do, but we're working with councils all the time, and with our partners and you'll see that we've done pretty much consistently on our Facebook page for the last 18 months. Our main focus has been about promoting those different products, more so than it's been about differentiating between and answering questions about the different types of materials that we take, because it's really important that we build this robust market that I've talked about. I think that's touched off on those questions. I'll put this slide up now, so if people want to go and have a look, we've got other resources there. There's videos, posts to the brochure. Note that they're going to be updated soon, but you can find us on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. Finally, we sorted that one out. If you're on LinkedIn, you can find us on LinkedIn. And if you've got any questions, you can email me at info@redgroup.net.au, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
I might just quickly jump on as well and say I did post the link to the REDCycle website and what they accept page, because we have had a few questions in the chat, which I know are covered in that list as well. So things like chip packets, those are on the list. And so it really, there's a lot of items on that list. I'd encourage you to go through and have a look at that one. I might just quickly, before we start on the questions, the last time I watched a webinar with you, you were talking about the sizing of soft plastics, and you mentioned A3, and if it's anything bigger, I think say like a big pet food bag, as long as it was filled with soft plastics, it was okay.
Yeah. So it's a good point to raise. So we do ask that most soft plastics that you put in are less than A3 size. So that's double an A4 size of paper. The reason being, if it's longer and bigger, it can get, I don't know if anybody goes and watches any of the videos and how this is processed, they go through a cutting machine. And if the pieces are too big, they can actually get entangled in that machinery, and it's a really expensive process to have that machinery fixed. That is why it's not about the bins. It's not about the bins not having capacity for larger pieces. It's because once it gets to processing, and that's why we can't have adhesive tapes and that kind of thing go through the machines either, because it all gets caught up and it just puts an end to the processing for a few days.
We have similar issues at our recycling facility. Obviously, we ask that these sort of items don't go through, but when we do get things like hoses and ropes and very long, like the banners that people put on fences, that sort of stuff, it wraps around the drums, and then it's a very expensive process to shut the entire facility down and pull all that.
Yeah.
It is a great thing to show visitors on tours, but otherwise not ideal.
Another one to mention there that we've just, the other one is bringing your materials in black plastic. We ask that people don't put your REDCycle materials into a black plastic bag, because when they get taken, they get bailed up from the supermarket and they're in those big red or green transparent bags. If there's a black bag, our drivers who do an initial quick sort of the material as it goes into the truck can't then see if it's got chicken carcasses or, you know, other rubbish and waste in there. So we need to make sure that, you know, if they did a quick look, they can tell that there's no other rubbish, and black plastic just prohibits us from being able to do that. And also note that you don't have to put them in bags. You can actually use your shopping bags to transport the soft plastics to the bin and just empty it in. They don't need to go in bags. They can be put in loose if that is helpful to anybody at all. So yeah, just no black plastic bags.
It's a good tip though, because it means if you do have them loose, you know, if the bin's a bit full at Coles or Woolies, you can sort of squeeze them in all the gaps.
Correct.
So we might just jump onto some of the questions from the chat. Let me just scroll up.
I might just stop my share and jump onto your screen. There we go.
Okay, so trying to scroll. So we had bubble wrap.
Yes, so bubble wrap is perfectly fine to accept if it's the clear bubble wrap. Again, just if it's in large sheets, please make sure it's cut down to A3. And I know that's difficult for some people, because if you get bubble wrap around big items of furniture, it is a process cutting it down, but we do need it to be cut down for the reasons that I mentioned.
I guess the other thing with that is if someone's maybe not able to cut down, buy nothing groups are a great way to get rid of that sort of stuff. So if you're not able to chop down, maybe someone can get a second life from it instead. So, and you know, part of National Recycling Week, we're plugging all that sort of stuff at the moment.
Great fun.
So we'll continue on. We had a question from Emma from the city of Armidale. Hi, Emma. With the high number of plastics recycled, is there any plans of having a sorting facility in WA?
So I might, let's just say there's an announcement happening this week that could be a positive thing for people to hear about. Not necessarily about WA, but there is an announcement coming, so stay tuned. I can't say anything more.
Should we make sure we're following your social media?
Yes, that'd be a good idea. Particularly LinkedIn, or some of our, it'll be on our Facebook and Instagram pages later, but certainly on our LinkedIn page.
Sure. So awesome. That sounds great. We had one from Steph. Can I put soft plastic in the dishwasher for cleaning?
if that's what you want to do and that works for you, then yeah, we know people who hand wash them and peg. I've had photos from people who peg them up on their lines outside, and their neighbours and they actually say my neighbours think I'm crackers. But yeah, if that's what you want to do, more than happy. As long as they're 100% dry before you put it in the bin, you can do what you like to them beforehand.
I may be one of those people. Only with potting mix bags though, because they're very hard to clean.
And I think somebody did ask about potting mix. So yeah, potting mix is fine. We just can't take fertilizer bags because there's chemicals in those, and there is an element of manual handling for either the drivers or the supermarket staff or our guys at the sorting facilities. So we've just got to be mindful that anything that indicates that it's toxic to touch, then that material we can't take. And that goes for pool chemicals as well. If the pool salt bags, I saw somebody mention pool salt. If it's a pool salt bag, if it doesn't give a warning on the pool salt bag that you can't touch it with your bare hands, then that's fine. But if there is a warning that it's toxic, then we can't take that material.
That actually leads on quite well to the next question, was what sort of a pre-sorting process happens before it goes to REDCycle and the other companies? Yeah,
so when it comes to so there's a bit of an initial sort by the supermarket staff. So if they do see some contaminants that they can quickly and easily pull out, they will. Obviously keeping their safety in mind, and obviously during COVID that's been a bit more difficult. And then our drivers have a quick look and do a quick review of the material. Then it goes to our facilities, our sorting facilities, and we are able to put it on conveyors and go through it and make sure, and then we bail it up. But we when it's on the conveyors, we can again see if there's any real rubbish in there. And then, yeah, it gets baled up and then sent off. And then it's our processors who then break it down to the smaller pallets. And there are some, like I said, if you jump on and look at some of the videos on REDCycle, they've got some great videos that show the whole process from bin to product, that you can see how it's made.
We've shared a couple of those recently on the Recycle Right page, but those, not that I expect everyone to have seen that, but they really are good videos, honestly. There's quite a few. There's one that shows, I think, the education centre as well. Would definitely recommend people jumping on for those. Yeah, it's good to be able to see, given that we can't get over there for a tour ourselves, it's good to be able to see that. We did have, I'm sort of summarising a couple of questions here. There's been some questions around like the yogurt pouches or milk bags, things like that, that you aren't able to clean out. Is that the sort of stuff that you would still accept?
So the yogurt pouches, so any type of, kids' food pouches and what have you, as long as you squeeze out as much of the content as you possibly can and then put the lid back on. It's the one case where we accept the little harder plastic lids back on the yogurt pouches. The small amounts that we get doesn't impact and doesn't have an impact on the processing, but putting the lids back on means that it prevents anything spilling out and therefore prevents contamination. But that doesn't mean that we can accept lids, because some people make the assumption then, then we can just throw our lids in. It's only on those particular pouches that if you just squeeze out as much as you can and put the lid back on.
Cool. We had one from Mark, which is for me. Thank you, Mark. If biscuit or cracker trays are not good for REDCycle, then are they for the yellow lid commingle bin or for landfill? Those I know are a little bit more of a trickier one. So things like a Tim Tam packet, how you've got the tray on the inside, the wrapper on the outside would be soft plastic, but the tray actually is considered a hard plastic. I know that one can lead to a little bit of confusion because it is pretty easily crushed, but that we do accept in the yellow lidded recycling bin. It would end up in our mixed plastic stream, but we're happy to take that. I did see a couple of people also in the questions that we received during registration, strawberry punnets and fruit punnets, that sort of stuff. Definitely not a soft plastic and definitely okay to go in your yellow lidded recycling bin. We get that question fairly often, and yet, they're all good for recycling. It's more, those. Oh, sorry.
All the time as well. So just on that, I should say that We have kind of moved away. I know you've used it and it was a good way to describe it, but we have kind of moved away from using the reference to scrunchables for this very reason, because people do say, but I can scrunch the biscuit tray and, you know, is that a soft plastic? So, and because there are some pet food bags that can't be scrunched, you know, the thicker ones that we can REDCycle. So there are cases on both ends that still can be REDCycled or can't be, depending. So we try to not necessarily refer to scrunchables anymore for that, because of that confusion, and more encouraging people to use the Australian recycling label symbols, or seeing a REDCycle symbol on the material. And just getting into the habit of looking for those, it's probably a safer way to go.
Yeah, and then for us, I guess on the flip side with the recycling stuff, it's more looking for that hard, rigid plastic to be able to go in recycling. I'll just keep going down the list. Is production? Oh, here's a curly one. Is the production of the recycled goods profitable in its own right?
Well, not necessarily right at this point in time, because we need more people to buy. And obviously, I guess it's the economies of scale. People need to understand that the more people who start buying this material, the less the prices are going to be, because we can produce them on a greater scale. So that's why it's also really important to increase the marketplace for these products. So, you know, the companies have still got to make money. The manufacturers still have to make money, because it is a process for them to create these products. And yes, for some people it seems a bit out of reach at the moment cost-wise, but if more people are purchasing it and there's a greater market for it, the prices are going to come down.
Little mention, we also bought one of the picnic tables, which we're very happy about.
Good.
Yeah, so we're very keen. We had Teresa, who's sitting next to me, and our waste education officer, Jared, spent an afternoon putting it together. So happy to have that at our recycling centre for the staff. We do have, a couple more questions.
Okay.
We've had a few people message through actually about the plastic around newspapers, like the rolled up newspapers when they're delivered.
This is a big one. So obviously for most commercial cling wrap that's used for those sorts of purposes is made from the PVC. So most of it can't be used. Having said that, some of the big media organisations are now starting to move away from that type of packaging. I know here in Melbourne that the Age is now delivered in so that it comes to you flat. It doesn't come rolled up anymore, and it's in like a magazine type plastic, like a crinkly plastic, which can definitely be REDCycled. So a lot of them are actually moving away from that type of cling wrap, because commercially it's generally made with PVC.
Thank you for that one. Someone has asked what the RED stands for in REDCycle or RED group.
We do get asked that a lot too, because people go, but it's confusing because of the red bins. So I've just noticed you were talking about your bins before. For your general waste, they've got the red cover on them. But here in my municipality, it's a green cover on that bin. We don't have red ones. So it does vary from council to council. Look, the RED stands for Recycling Education. So that's where RED comes from, because there was RED Group, so that's the main organisation, and then REDCycle was one of the programs that came from RED Group. So that's why it's called REDCycle.
Thank you for that one. Someone else who I'm assuming might be talking from, I guess, a business point of view, how do people go about getting the REDCycle symbol on their packaging?
Yeah, so if you email us at the info email address that I had up on the screen before, and I'm sure will be shared after this presentation, we then send you the partnership information. There are some certain guidelines that you need to follow. You need to be an APCO member and then go through that APCO process, and then we do the assessment with APCO and determine what of your products are able to be REDCycled, and then the costs involved depend on the number of products you have in the market, the number of locations they're sold at, so it varies. There's no standard rate, so I can't sit here and say it costs this much to have that happen, but it is done as part of the APCO and ARL symbol process that I mentioned before, so it's all tied in together now.
We had one come through from James, and I'm assuming this is to do with the APCO standards as well. So when you're referring to biodegradable as one of the goals for packaging, it says their understanding from viewing material is that this is not possible due to the microplastics. I think that might be talking about the difference between biodegradable and compostable, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so there are differences. So there are some plastics that claim to be biodegradable but are not commercially biodegradable, and they're only biodegradable within your home. There are some plastics that say that they're degradable. So they're the ones that don't necessarily, they're the ones that become microplastics, so that becomes an issue. We can't accept any biodegradable, degradable or compostable plastics through REDCycle. The reason being because they've deliberately had an additive put in to initiate that breakdown of the material. And you can imagine that if we're then mixing that into the plastics to make the seats, it actually impacts the structural integrity of that seat, and it will collapse when somebody sits on it. So that's why we don't take those materials. But yeah, there are different standards, but you'd have to speak to your local council about, you know, which ones they will take in their compost, your green bins, for example, because it will differ depending on whether it's commercially biodegradable and compostable or not.
Or in other ways, speak to REDCycle, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. I was going to say I'll speak to you guys.
Yeah, so the standard recycling rules that are across WA also apply to the rules for the other bins. So we host the official A to Z list of those items of what to do with them on the Recycle Right page. And so it means that you can jump on, and it's the same rules for what should be going in a garden organics bin across all garden organics, across all councils that have garden organics bins, and the same thing for FOGO. So at the Resource Recovery Group, 3 of our member councils have FOGO bins, and the rules for those are the same across the councils. We don't currently accept a lot of the compostable packaging just because it's very easy for people to get confused between plastic and compostable and the biodegradable and that sort of stuff. But in WA, we mostly, if we're looking for compostable packaging, you're looking for the little leaf symbol. That's that Australian certification for being compostable. So I'll jump on to another question just because, yeah, not really related to soft plastics. What kind of products can we buy that are made from recycled plastic, I guess, other than the park benches?
So as mentioned before, so there's the park benches, there's decking. You can buy decking for your, you know, your backyard and your patio area. You can buy the mini wheel stops that I mentioned before. If you jump on the Plastic Forests website, there's a whole lot of gardening related products that you can buy. So garden edging, garden stakes, so the traditional star pickets that were made from steel, you can now buy those made from recycled materials and recycled plastics. Yeah, so check out Replas and Plastic Forests, and they have a whole range of products that are able to be sold to consumers.
Cool. I'm just checking the list to see if we've got any more. We do have a couple minutes left, so if anyone else has any burning questions, make sure you chuck them in the chat now. So we had a question about pet food bags. So if, because you were saying that your soft plastics don't necessarily need to be bagged up. So if people are putting soft plastics into pet food bags because they're opaque, would that be the same deal as with the black plastic where you're able to see what's in it?
It's a bit different. So yeah, those are fine.
Okay, cool. Yep. Does anyone else have any other questions? We've just got Rebecca for 6 more minutes.
And if not, if you're a bit shy to ask now, that's fine. You don't have to share publicly. You can always email us at the info email address, and I'll be happy to get back to you. I'm a little behind on that inbox, I will say, so bear with me for a few days to get through them all. Oh,
we did have a couple more come through, and one that I love, the fruit stickers, like stickers on apples. Yeah, great way to those.
Yep, you can take those off the fruit, obviously, because you don't want to eat them, and put them on another piece of soft plastic packaging, and then they can be recycled. They're fine.
Perfect. And then cat litter bags was, I think, the last one.
Yeah, they're fine. They're just a normal plastic. Yep.
Cool, awesome. Well, yeah, I might wrap it up there just because I'm sort of aware of the time. Like Rebecca said, if you've got any queries specific to REDCycle that aren't covered under that list that's on their website, feel free to chuck her an email. For any recycling questions for Perth/WA, feel free to give us a yell. Like I said, we're that host for that official A to Z list, and a lot of my job. So yeah, if you've got any queries for us, any of our social media, we've got an email, we've got the website, there's a contact form on the website as well. If there's anything that's not covered under that A to Z list, give us a yell and we're more than happy to help. And if you're in one of our member councils, we're more than happy to do events and incursions and all that sort of stuff as well. So a really big thank you for everyone for coming along to the webinar. I know it was a booked out event and we had a lot of people who were on the wait list and all that sort of stuff as well. This has been recorded too, and so we will be posting it up on our YouTube channel. It is National Recycling Week, so it may not be immediately. But yeah, look out for that one as well. And I guess spread the word about REDCycle. So yeah, thank you everyone. And we might end it there. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me, guys. And happy National Recycling Week.